Hey everyone, welcome to Growing Web3. I'm super excited today to have Rafa with me, also known as Rafa the Builder on Twitter. He is a truly tremendous thinker who explores Web3 collectives, combining org design with digital community building. He's currently working at Mirror, supporting their building and community growth efforts. And Rafa really is focused on working as a community architect. He's way ahead when it comes to thinking about how communities grow, how they're structured, and his research and work around this is phenomenal. So I'm very excited to have him on the show today.
Excited to be here.
Maybe we could kick off. You could tell us a little bit about yourself. You could give a much better explanation about who you are and what you're interested in. And then, we can go from there.
Today, as you mentioned, I work at Mirror supporting their community and growth strategy. Previous to that, I've actually spent the better part of a decade exploring and learning about organization design, how humans coordinate, how companies are built, and how work is divided, and how we collaborate to produce, to create, to craft wonderful things. And over the last couple of years, I've really learned that we are going through a significant transition through the adoption of the internet, not just as a toolkit, but as something that is actually embedded as natural, embedded into the work that we do every day, not as something extra, but actually something that's in the DNA of how we're coordinating. And that changes a lot of things, and I call it a bit of a transformation because we're moving from a place where we didn't have instantaneous communication, a perfect memory, one might say, from all the documentation and all the recording that we're doing today, and a significant amount of data at our fingertips, where our skill sets are changing from memorization to search. And this changes the way that organizations are built and also enables new forms of collaboration. I'm particularly excited because it decreases the cost of collaborating significantly. Whereas before, it was quite difficult to get a large group of people together, an audience, to move in the same direction and create momentum on a specific belief, ideology, movement, culture, or passion. Right now, that's easily accessible. And so I'm very excited to be part of that transition, explore it, observe, and hopefully learn a little bit as to what the future might look like when these tools are adopted everywhere, and when we get to the next generation of tooling that includes both artificial intelligence, blockchain, and just ubiquitous access to information.
Awesome. So where do you think we are in this kind of transition to these new age organizational structures when it comes to Web3? Like, we've seen DAOs emerge over the last 5-6 years. I think in the last 2 to 3 years, they've really become popular. Do you think they're still super early and super nascent and really just still experiments, or do you think they're more developed than a lot of people are thinking right now?
I think it can be confusing to kind of like try to pick where we are. I don't know. The quote that reminds me is like, time is a flat circle, like nothing is really new under the sun. And if we look back, communities have been around forever. We've had really structured community building for a very long time, across all countries. Even 30, 40 years ago, when we're thinking about the 1970s and 80s, the internet did have communities that were emerging. One that kind of comes to mind is called The Well. And even more recently, there have been a lot of digital communities on Facebook groups, on Reddit, on Discord, gaming communities, Twitch. And so I would argue that the digital communities is not necessarily a new movement. I think that has been there for a while. I think what's new, though, is the ability to pool funds and collectively have purchasing power, have a lot of financial power. Whereas previously, you had to have a banking institution support you in resource management. Right now, because of the blockchain, we have the ability to gather funds and manage funds without that sort of intermediary. And so a lot of the communities that have existed in the past, where the resources were mostly focused on manpower and individual purchasing power, we've moved to a point where now we have collective purchasing power and pooled funds. And so I guess in that sense, maybe we're in the second or third phase or a third iteration of this, with DAOs likely being the latest iteration, but probably far from the last. I think DAOs are probably the first generation of pooled funds and communities, and I'm quite eager to kind of see what happens next.
Absolutely. And I think the interesting thing about DAOs is how simple and how complex they can be. So we see DAOs governing very complex, or let's maybe not complex, but governing protocols, which, like Uniswap or Compound, that have billions of dollars of assets being managed and governed by the DAO, which is really incredible to see. And then we also have DAOs that have been spun up for like specific purposes, like Constitution DAO, which was very much everyone throw in some cash together and let's, do this one thing. Let's try and buy the Constitution. I think it's really interesting to see how both those use cases have emerged, and they're like on complete opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, I think it's kind of similar to the creator economy, right? Where you have like big creators and smaller creators, and you have the big celebrities who have a broad audience, and then you have niche, uh, very specific niche creators who have a set of 100 true patrons who kind of support the work. And I think we're going to see that same kind of distribution of scale with communities where DAOs both enable you to be a lot smaller and a lot bigger, potentially in the current than the previous archetypes of organization design.
And what do you think are the kind of key challenges for founders, community people who are trying to grow or trying to start, like building a new organization?
Over most recently, I've been thinking about this concept of this Web3 application stack where you have a community, you have a product interface, and you also have the protocol. Whereas the protocol itself, we can unpack that to think about it as the composable infrastructure, so like smart contracts on the blockchain. And you can think about the product interface, which is what consumers or users or your audience like directly touches and engages with. And then you can think about the community as the group of participants who have a voice and a governing responsibility. So, group of citizens who both provide input and guidance on the product interface and may be actually held accountable and responsible for a lot of the settings for the smart contracts and kind of provide oversight. And that group of citizens may pool their funds and help extend the product or help build additional interfaces on top of the protocol. So when we think about these three different areas for the application, then a lot of people today need to start asking themselves, like, in what sequence am I going to build this? How do I want these different aspects coupled or decoupled from each other? And where is going to be your anchor of focus, where you think about accruing your value? So we've seen organizations, for example, Friends with Benefits, who launched specifically with a community and have now started to build products, and will likely move into building protocols. And we've seen Web3 organizations like Lenster, who have built a protocol and now are mobilizing a group of developers to build interfaces. and are building a community on top of it. So as a founder today, as someone who is interested in building and expanding on the work that on the tools that are available, you kind of need to ask those questions. So where am I building first? Where am I going to accrue value to? And how coupled do I want it? Do I want my community separate to the protocol and product that I'm working with, or do I want them heavily intertwined? Is my interface heavily intertwined with a specific protocol, or is it composable across multiple different protocols I can like feed into the interface product? And so when we think about challenges, I think less about. So there are challenges with each of these, right? Building a great user interface in Web3 is definitely a big challenge. Making sure that your protocol is airtight and doesn't have security issues, making sure that your community grows with the right type of advocates, so you create an actual community and not a financialized audience. And so there's just a lot of trade-offs that you need to take. And I think at the end of the day, the recommendation, similar to, I think this is like age-old wisdom, is don't do too much. If you're going to start with a community, make sure you get the community right. If you're going to start with a product and interface, make sure you get the product and interface correct and product market fit, because you don't want to build a community of people who aren't aligned to your product and value proposition.
I wanted to go back to this like stack that you described. So you have like the protocol, you have the application layer, and then you have the community layer. I kind of think it's really interesting because at Hype, we work with a lot of layer one protocols, and their challenges are, like you got to set off the flywheel by essentially building good tech. So you've got to acquire like lots of developers. And then the developers come so it's all developer first. The developers come and they build applications, and then you've got to incentivize, or you've got to figure out how you can onboard as many community members, users to those applications. So that's like the product layer. And then, the user layer is the community layer. So I feel like it's also like there's a spectrum between like, if you're starting out, it's like, are you like on the tech side where you're like trying to build a protocol, the product side, where you're trying to build an application, or maybe like the culture side where you want to go community first. I really like the example of FWB because they were like culture first, and now they're moving back up the stack the opposite way. And I don't think I've worked with any organizations like that. I think it's quite unique.
That sequence that you define, so if we think about different sequences, whether you're building protocol, then an interface, and then a community, or you're building an interface first, and then a community, and then hardening a protocol. The sequence starting with community, I think, is the real groundbreaker. Previously, we had Kickstarter, but Kickstarter was about gathering funds into a centralized pool. It wasn't actually about necessarily mobilizing a community of people to start producing with a specific mission, vision, or ideology in mind. And so I think this ties back to this concept that Toby from Shorin from Other Internet has talked about often, this trifecta between supply chain, branding, and culture. And I think it was very difficult before the internet, because we didn't necessarily have global access of distribution and recruitment of talent and individuals, to get a group of people together that were like-minded and had similar passions. Now we do, and it's not just that we can connect with them. I can launch a community mission statement and gather people that believe the same things that I believe, but we can actually gather funds and produce revenue together that can then get mobilized based on the community mission. And so that to me feels like that sequence of starting with the community feels like a significant game changer, whereas previously that network of participants, of advocates, would be something that would happen later stage in the growth of an organization.
Awesome. That's super cool. I am a huge fan of everything that Toby, and other internet do. So I highly recommend anyone who isn't familiar with them to check out. It's just otherinternet.co or .com, I think. But check out Other Internet. You'll be able to find them. And check out Toby Shorin's writing. It's super cool. What do you think are the most interesting experiments in new operational models, organizations around Web3, around communities?
I think so. The most recent example that let me see, which I mean, I think a cabin is probably one of my favorite experiments. So Creator Cabins is creating a decentralized city. And they did, so Jonathan Hillis started a community of creators about 2 years ago. And then with the help of Zach, their co-founder, they did a crowdfunding campaign last May, so back in 2021, and started the Creator Cabins DAO. And through that experiment, they're finding ways to create a decentralized city through creating nodes of property that are interconnected by the community that engages with those properties. And I think it's really fascinating. I think it's humble beginnings. There was Jonathan Hillis they're constructing the nodes themselves, a lot of them. Okay. So they've been building in the real world and connecting them automatically into the network of people who are participating. That's quite exciting. That's kind of like starting a town where you have a group of people who are migrating to that town. But instead of that town being a single geographic location, it's actually in a single subculture location online. And that to me is really fascinating. That concept of we're gathering, but we're not gathering based on geography. We're gathering based on a belief of collaboration and cooperative and a cooperative mindset. And I'm really looking forward to see where they go. I was an active contributor last year. Not so much. I've taken a little bit of a break as I've been focusing on other projects. But some of the work that they're doing is really exciting. One of the examples is that they're creating a passport. So this membership participation collects reputation based on your participation, and that accrues like value over time and specific privileges as a citizen. So over time, you become an acknowledged citizen of the Cabin decentralized city.
Very cool. I'm going to say an organizational experiment that I think is most interesting to me is Folklore. So you can now tell everyone about Folklore.
Yeah, so a couple of weeks ago, well, sorry, a little bit before that. So over the past couple of years, I've been gathering knowledge myself. So curating articles, sharing those articles. And that's actually how I got started on Twitter. I was sharing my musings with regards to the content that I was reading, loosely around this concept that has been recently labeled as lore, or digital lore in a sense, but closely related to this content of how the digital realms are evolving, maybe is the right wording. So community building online, how people are connecting. And so a couple of weeks ago, I was thinking about the fact that I've gathered a lot of this information and there's still a lot of research to be done. And I was wondering, how can I create a community? And I was like thinking back to the things that I usually do for community building. I was like, you know what? I should start a decentralized media organization. So Gabby and Kieran defined this concept of a DAM, a decentralized media network, and inspired through their work, I was like, let me take a look at this. I know there's another experiment, for example, Rehash, which is doing a podcast series in a decentralized fashion, and which I would recommend you look into it as well. And so I started a community of Folklore, but I wanted it to be the opposite of social media. I didn't want it to be like a Discord with a bunch of notifications. I was like, I want this to be as simple as possible, as useful as possible, and as calm as possible. So Folklore, in short, is just a Telegram group where there's one or two articles shared a day, um, but that have been curated over a series of years. So it's very high signal. And then you have a membership token where whoever has purchased it can participate in the comments, essentially, in replies and commenting for a period of 6 months. It's an experiment.
Yeah.
Half of the funds go to charity, and half of the funds are allocated to commissioning new writing work. So over time, what I'm looking for is almost like an automated, decentralized magazine where people subscribe. Those subscriptions get automatically invested into writing that the community is interested in. And that writing itself gets completed and shared with the community and then sold as writing NFTs to the broader group, which then those turn into subscribers, which then get reinvested in more writing. So both serves as a public good and as an alternative to kind of social media. So instead of spending your morning on Twitter, you can spend your morning reading an article that the community has curated that is meaningful and hopefully provides you ongoing insights.
I love that. So yeah, and that's how can people find Folklore?
So you can go to folklore.mirror.xyz. There's a first article is called Welcome to Folklore. And we do have only 150 spots. So there's, I don't know, there might be 20 or 30 left as of the moment that you're listening to the podcast. But if you didn't get a spot, that's okay. We'll follow me on Twitter or follow folklore_0x on Twitter, and we'll make an announcement for the next subscription batch that will be available in a couple months.
Amazing. So I have a couple more questions to ask. So what type of organizational structures from now do you see being pretty successful over the next 3 to 5 years? One thing I see that I'm loving right now is Nouns DAO and this kind of light but fast governance. I think that's kind of cool, and I think there's also a really quick positive feedback loop that things are going to happen, and it's only going to take 10 minutes to vote on a proposal every day, and the treasury's growing every day, so it's kind of got this really engaging feedback loop, which I really like. Whereas some big protocols that have a big governance proposal every 2 or 3 months, it's kind of easy to just not be so engaged. So I'd love to hear, what kind of organizations and structures do you see kind of, really growing over the next few years?
I think, I'm going to stick with the word interesting, not necessarily good or bad. The 2024 elections in the US are coming up, and this decentralized organizing and pool funds are very likely going to create a new type of political organizations. Citizens, in action, one might say. I'm looking forward to localized citizens coordinating for good, whether that be pooling funds and then activating infrastructure development at a local and a national level. I'm looking forward to political organizations as a new muscle that might counterbalance corporate entities and traditional influence that has been very common over the past at least 50 years in the U.S. since 1970s and 1980s specifically. So I suspect that as this coordination cost decreases, we're likely going to get a lot more coordinated advocacy, probably at a new type of level. They will likely mimic something more like it will be likely a range of different structures. Some might be more like Constitution DAO, where there'll be like a flash in the pan to put pressure for specific policy to be put in order, or they might be more of a slow burn, and it might look like a new type of political entity that is doing institutional placement of talent. So you can imagine a situation where citizens around the world have a specific belief or ideology. They begin pulling funds and they begin placing their members in governmental institutions to have structured influence on the work that is being done in leadership positions. I think this has always happened, but I suspect that there might be more transparency and it might be more accessible. And my hope is that within that accessibility, we'll see new types of priorities come up, and hopefully priorities that are good for human flourishing at a global level.
Love that. That's super, super cool. So essentially a lot of different types of organizational structures powered by this new technology, helping humans coordinate in a much more efficient way.
I think it can be a little bit scary because we're moving from a place where corporations and businesses were mostly focused on product market fit. So like, is your product in demand, to maybe ideological fit. So is your culture and ideology in demand, and how does it resonate? And this transition period, I think we should be quite cynical and we should be quite paranoid about what it might be able to look like. And I think this is a call to action to all of us that we should get involved, because we want to participate and not necessarily be passive in how these new organizations are designed, and what types of organizations become influential. And so I think this has, again, always been the case, but as coordination becomes more accessible to so many people, I think it is incumbent on us to also play a larger role in that process.
So the final question I have is a question I ask everyone, and it's a bit of a wild card. The question is, so if you could be CMO, head of growth, head of community for any organization, it can't be Mirror, it can't be Folklore, unfortunately. Which one would you choose?
Oh,
or maybe it's a new one. Question. Maybe it's something.
It's a really good question. So I support a nonprofit in Puerto Rico helping local artisans. And I do believe that the role of artisanal craft, whether it be online or whether it be physical as a maker, will play a larger role as kind of like digital abundance comes into play. Like, I think art and the embedding culture into our homes and into our lives will play a larger role. I would love to see a continued expansion of the artists' voices across everything that we do. I would love to see artisans involved, in building the infrastructure, the next generation infrastructure. I was walking around Berlin, for example, today, and you see, these incredibly beautiful facades, and then you see modern buildings, and it begs a question like, have we lost some of that beauty in the search of the efficiency and efficacy and this industrial modernism and minimalism of the past couple of years? And I would like us to maybe revisit really looking for beauty and our own expression of our beliefs into the work that we do. both physically and digitally. So if I was to decide, if I was going to lead up an organization, I would like to work on that, which is supporting artists and artisans in particular to take a more active role, not just in production of goods and in product design, but also in public infrastructure and community well-being.
That's awesome. That's like make the world more beautiful DAO, or
Yeah.
make things more culturally relevant. Yeah, I completely agree that I think that's going to be a huge need, because that's what makes us human, all these quirks.
I mean, you can
intricacies.
Imagine a world where you can 3D print like artisanal crafts to your home, or print high quality imitations of classical paintings to place in your wall. And like I think that at the end of the day, technology enables you to have more beautiful things. So more access, more distribution, but also just more beauty within your home and within your life. And I would love to see more of that, so that we're not just thinking about, do you have a barbecue, but maybe you want a barbecue designed by a specific person. And yeah, maybe you can't buy the original, but it would be amazing if we could create the accessibility for beautiful design and just astounding beauty in your home for everything, for everyday items.
Amazing. Love that. Thank you so much. So people can find you on Twitter, Rafa the Builder. Amazing. Thank you so much, Rafa.
Appreciate it.